Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, Instagram, Twitter, and Rumble. And of course, be sure to visit mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
Everybody who hasn't read a Stephen King book has still seen a Stephen King movie.
It all started with Carrie.
Seeing her burn everything down at the end, you're watching it and it's thrilling.
Creepshow had a massive impact.
It completely traumatized me.
Aren't you going to say hello?
Pet Sematary is a great movie.
Misery is one of my favorites.
Stephen King writes human beings, and then he puts them in phantasmagorical situations.
Instead of setting everything in big cities, he chooses locations that are identifiable for everybody.
It's an idealized America, but then it's ripped apart and sent to hell.
When I think of my favorite Stephen King movies, I think of Stand By Me and The Shawshank Redemption.
I remember being shocked that someone who I associated so much with horror was capable of creating something so beautiful.
Much of Stephen King's work seems to be about how we treat each other.
Whether it's the family in Cujo or what's happening in The Shining between Jack and Wendy.
This isn't like it's coming. This is about what's here.
That's the legend of Stephen King, is able to see things in the future that the average person can't.
He's been such a mirror for pop culture, but now he is his own pop culture.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 550. Releasing August 11 in theaters across the US is King on Screen, a documentary that dives into the wide ocean of Stephen King screen adaptations in which cinematic classics such as The Shining, The Shawshank Redemption, and It reside. Featuring interviews with the directors of these adaptations, including Frank Darabont, Taylor Hackford, and Mike Flanagan, King on Screen is a must-watch for Stephen King novice and fan alike. And joining me now is the director of King on Screen, Daphne Baiwir. Daphne, I thank you so very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
So it's really interesting when it comes to the world of Stephen King on film. Numerous writers have been adapted on film. You know, your John Grishams, your John le Carré's, you so many people, but none matched the prolific presence and success that Stephen King had with his adaptations. What do you think it is about his writing, his world, his characters that translates so well to the screen, do you think? Because I think it's just incredibly fascinating how ever since Carrie, the Stephen King movie has become a subgenre on its own in movies.
Yeah, it's quite impressive because at the same time, he's one of the most prolific author because he writes something like 2 novels a year, which is kind of amazing. You know, it's not the case of most authors. And at the same time, a lot of well-known directors adapted his books on screen. So I think it's somehow the thing that really allowed him to have such a great popularity, you know, and such a fame as a writer. And but it's not the only thing at all, because when you are reading Stephen King, you see how much he's able to portrayed so well the characters and how he's able to write characters that are so deep. You know, there is so much depth in them, and I think it's something interesting for a filmmaker because it allows you to go to go further, and when you have to translate on the screen a book that's more than 500 pages, I think it's a great thing that the characters are amazing, because otherwise you would lose some of the essence, because it's quite difficult, to be able to write a book like this. To make a film and to cut in a book that is so long. So yeah.
You, no doubt, you making this documentary, you have a love for Stephen King movies, especially. What is it about his film adaptations? Does it really speak to you as an actor, as a writer, as a director? And do your perceptions at all of Stephen King and his novels, his films, change in any way after doing this movie? Were there things that you learned about him and the filmmakers that made his movies that were different afterwards compared to what any types of perceptions she had beforehand?
Well, I am not sure that something really changed, but it's always interesting to learn a lot about the filmmaker's process, while adapting him. It's something that is, one of the things that really impressed me is to see that, some of the directors really knew Stephen King before adapting him, and were huge fans. When we talk about Josh Boone, for example, or Vincenzo Natali, or Frank Darabont, they were really King's fan before adapting him. And at the same time, some of the directors didn't really know his work, and they discover it because they had this great project between their hands, and they thought, okay, I'm doing this, but they weren't really aware of Stephen King's work. And after making the film, it really changed how they perceived the author, and they really became fans, after making a first film. So I think it's interesting, and it's one of the things that I really learn is the fact that you have those people who really had another opinion. I wouldn't say opinion, but who saw the author in a different way,
I find it really interesting whenever I read stories of how writers or directors would adapt a novel, whether it be a Stephen King novel or what have you, because we're dealing with different mediums here, different forms of art. And what's really fascinating and interesting with your movie, if you took the time to delve into the conflict between Kubrick and King when it came to The Shining, and I always wanted to always something on my mind is, what is the obligation that a filmmaker should have towards an author's work? Should they be looking into adapting the spirit of the work, or is it about just taking the story and the characters and framing it into something else? Where do you kind of lie when it comes to that? Do you think that when it came to The Shining, for example, that both men are right in a situation where King had the right to be disappointed with the film, but Kubrick also had the right to go with his artistic vision? Or do you think there needs to be some sort of obligation on the filmmaker's part to make sure that the spirit, at least the spirit of the novel they're adapting, is catered to?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's an interesting thing to talk about, because there's not one right side and another wrong side somehow. So, but at the end, I think, as a filmmaker, when you are adapting an author, you have to respect somehow the essence of the work. And I think that, Kubrick took a lot of liberties when he adapted King. And at the same time, when you watch the film, it's a film that is working well. It's stunning. I mean, visually, it's absolutely stunning. And at the same time, I can see why there were so many criticism about it. And because, it's it's something about the characters that is not working that well. And they were, even when the film was released, a lot of criticism about the characters in that film that really bothered a lot of the audience, and not only the King fans, but also, the persons who weren't familiar with the book and who saw the film thinking, okay, but we don't have an arc in Jack Torrance's state of mind, and it's something that disturbed a lot of people, whether they were a fan of King or not.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you will love. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon. The world's leading online store, Amazon is your first stop to buy a wide range of products at competitive prices with fast delivery times. Amazon is also a world-class entertainment hub that includes Prime Video, Audible, Twitch, Amazon Music, and more. Sign up with Amazon today and experience the best in online shopping and entertainment. Please support Matt's Movie Reviews on Patreon. Get access to exclusive content, request movie reviews and top 10 lists, and help support my work. Please click on the Patreon link in the description below. The film consists of interviews with varied directors who worked on all sorts of Stephen King adaptations. When it came to reaching out to directors, who were the first names that you kind of reach out to get the ball rolling, so to speak? Because the list is long because there's been so many movies, but were there names that you wanted to get in touch with first, that not only was important to the making of the film, but also that you knew that if you got these people on board, then hopefully other people would then say, this is we know these guys, we know they're very serious about their work, and if they're talking to Daphne, then she must be onto something really good here, and we want to talk to her as well.
Well, I know that the first time we reached to directors, we sent something like 10 emails, which shows like 10 directors. I know there was Mick Garris, Frank Darabont, Taylor Hackford, and I'm not sure about the other names, but we really tried at first to see if the directors were willing to talk about the work, because if we had like one or two directors, we would have thought, okay, well, we can't make this movie with, not so many people. And so it was the first step that we really had to do. And then after we saw that a lot of the directors were in and said, okay, I'm doing it. And it was so thrilling, having Frank Darabont, Mick Garris, Taylor Hackford, and all those great directors, Tom Holland, etc., who said, okay, I'm in, because, you see that the film is going to be something special because you are able to have them in the film. And sometimes at a later stage, when we had a lot of the directors, some of them weren't in the documentary, and it's thanks to Frank Darabont and Vincenzo Natali, for example, that we got Greg Nicotero and Josh Boone. So we were in kind of both situation, trying to make something work with nothing at the beginning, and then after having this chance to have and then later having the chance to have all those directors reaching other people.
I'm sure the big reason why so many people wanted to talk to you as well is that the questions you were asking were fresh, were original. These directors would have talked about their movies about Stephen King during promotion and many interviews as well. How important was it to you that not only that you approach your questions towards them to be just that fresh and original, but also a lot of time was put into research into the filmmakers themselves, how they approach the work and how they approach Stephen King's work, because, having doing interviews like this with filmmakers as well, I like to pride myself in doing a lot of research and such, and I'm sure you and your team would have done would have watched and read a lot of interviews with these filmmakers to make sure that, number one, you weren't repeating yourself in any way. Number two, you wanted to get really authentic, unique answers to create a really authentic, unique film.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's a work that took a lot of time. It took months because I really wanted to do things correctly. So I read every interviews that the director gave about the movie. And I was quite doing all that part alone because we were such a small team, at the beginning. It's a really independent documentary. So for most of the film, we were just two, the producer, Sebastian Cruz, and me doing all the work for the most part. And even the interviews, we were often just the two of us doing everything, sound, image, everything. So, but yeah, I really wanted to be able to dig into the material and to know exactly what the directors have said already about the films. And at the same time, sometimes you are thinking, oh, wow, that's an interesting story. It could be great to have it in the documentary. So sometimes you are asking them questions that you already know the answer, just so you can have it in the film. And sometimes you can really dig a little bit more in their work and ask a more precise question. But at the same time, you always have this kind of you have to find this balance, because when you are making a documentary like this, you want people who are not that familiar with Stephen King, who don't know him that well, to be able to watch the film. So when you are doing something like that, it's really about finding the right balance between, okay, is someone that knows nothing about Stephen King is able to watch the film and to fully understand everything without seeing the films before, because if you are talking about a film for a long time, you want people to have seen it. So that's why we were focused on films that were, like Shawshank Redemption. I mean, almost everyone have seen this film, even if you're not a huge Stephen King fan, you've seen Shawshank Redemption. For most of people who are interested in cinema, I mean. So yeah, there was a lot of work that art, and trying to. One of the things that I really want to be clear about was the fact that I wasn't going to edit what the directors told in a different manner, because there are a lot of people in my field that are making stuff up when they are editing what the director said. And it was something that I really wanted to be clear about. It's the fact that I wouldn't do that, because like 80% of the documentaries are doing that kind of things. And finding someone to work on the edit and saying, okay, I don't want to do that, it's not easy,
Yes, of course. Well, I think all the effort that you put into it has really resulted in a real fine documentary here. And I think for everyone out there listening, whether you're a Stephen King fan, whether you're a Stephen King new to the whole Stephen King experience, I think King on Screen is an essential watch. And I really urge people to watch the movie in theaters first, buy a ticket, go to the cinema, watch it in theaters, because it's not only a great documentary, great interviews, it's great filmmaking craft in the movie as well. And I think, Daphne, you did a great job here. Congrats with King on Screen. Best of luck with the film's release. And I thank you so very much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really glad you like the film. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.